Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all participants joining us from around the world. On behalf of the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs, it is my pleasure to welcome you to this virtual commemoration of the International Day of World Indigenous Peoples 2026, held under the theme Honoring Indigenous Midwives, Safeguarding Life and Well-Being. This year's commemoration recognizes Indigenous midwives as knowledge holders, caregivers, leaders, and custodians of Indigenous knowledge systems, whose contributions extend far beyond maternal health to encompass community well-being, cultural continuity, and Indigenous peoples' self-determination. As this event is hosted by the United Nations from New York, we acknowledge that UN headquarters stands on the ancestral homeland of the Lenape people. We honor the Lenape as the original stewards of these lands and waters and recognize their continuing presence, contributions, and enduring relationship with this territory. We also acknowledge Indigenous peoples around the world whose cultures, knowledge systems, and leadership continue to enrich our shared future. It is now my honor to invite Ms. Maria Kinelen, Mapuche traditional midwife, healer, and keeper of ancestral knowledge, to begin our gathering with the ceremonial opening. Ms. Kinelen, please.
Señora María, estamos prontos para la abertura, si está lista usted también. No la podemos escuchar. ¿Se puede hacer unmute, por favor, en su teléfono, en su audio?
Muy buenos días.
Sí, ahora sí. Gracias, muchas gracias.
Aquí estamos con don José Cristóbal Curillán, ceremoniante mapuche, con quienes vamos a hacer nuestro rezo inicial por el encuentro de todos los pueblos indígenas del mundo, para que vuelvan a nacer los indígenas del mundo a través de las manos de las parteras, en las montañas, en las islas, en los ríos, a la orilla del mar, en todos los pueblos del mundo. Bueno, Walma punchao, bueno, Walma punchao, ganeche, bueno, Walma panalchen, bueno, Walma panalcha, bueno, Walma puentro, huela que piquipa pero, buentro tu momoñen, buentro tu manto, ayun, con pucamenewen, tami choichun, meliwi drama.
Elem kofe fechang, elem kofe pushen. Hey, mita mi kom nauta mulanda ni gato mai gata fa chao. Kompu gai mapu, kompu gai waya pu peta in gato mai chao. In cinta mapu chicken nu amechita ni gato mekete in mai. Wenu mapu fechao, wenu mapu kushen. Hey, mita lel mu in gato fa chen in gato, lel mu in gato fa chen ibun. Hey, mita wol de in. Kutampiu kala mo in mai chao. Kom tai pu chengen mli luta, minani luta fa chen kiman. Mulia lupu pengi, mahui damo mulia chipu pengi, puko ni tuke fe pula wen chong elo, ne wen peni hami chao, mulia luta inal tulapin, ne wen peni hami chao, winkul pia, winkul mota mulia lo, Punta kumalkalete mai wano mapucha wano mapuyuke dunia mita newen. Isu tayo ng naunta mulalaing. Mulay luta chipandel von mutapu pengi pulamen. Kake mo ifun po pengi kake mo ifun pulamen. Newin peniami chao. Hey mita change pepe fi mita change ingkong ng mai chao. Hom puwariam. Kinyan pulento ko making ngayon. Refrang nga mga chao. Kau mangen mai chao na wen penya mai nya dunia mai inta na wen. Elunia mai inta kiman. Kechula ya inta sungumeo. Hey mita braka wal tu nia mai. Na wen penya mai. Wesa ke suko. Tukul tukul gel na ba ke je fuleta in pupenyi. Kate boy fun pupenyi kate boy fun pulamen. Na wen penya mi. Kinya lepo kinya rofa kawal mo. Lepo nento nila fumita wesa ke suko. Kami kesumuta kom lepeta incinta yakua mulai mai chao. Incinta ipu mafu chengen. Mulai ta ipu penye mulai peta ipu lamen. Never penya mi chao. Que chola ya inta sumobeo. Que chola ya inta rakizo ameo. Petu cham chike penye chike lamen. Kanta tana peta tabachi kiman. Yen ya ita tabachi sumo. Yen ya ita tabachi ne cham. Kinyan palento ko niya fuli chao. Hey mitana wen to niya mai wano mapa vicha wano mapa kushem. Yen laken vicha yen laken kushem. Hey mitami na wen tayo na to laken kamer kalepe tami po foto tangin punya wen. Wen ko momuli si panyi pula wen. Muli si panyi wen ko momuli yelo. Na wen to niya ami chao. Isu tayo na unta mulay ng tati meo. Muli chipu panyi mauhira mo muli yelo. Anyway, penihami chao. Yekala yang mai chao. Hey mitalo ni ami tanewen. Weme chimaita mula mulyen taning liaton tatapa chao. Wenu mapo ficha, wenu mapo kushem. El chen kushem. Newen chen ficha, newen chen kushem. En mawida ficha, en mawida kushem. Ngen winkul ficha, ngen winkul kushem. Ngen laken ficha, ngen laken kushem. Ngen leufu ficha, ngen leufu kushem. Newen penya mi tame po foto mai po mulay luta po wan ma po mai chao. Wen te boy taning ya to mai tatawa no ma po chao no ma po yuke yo.
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 Yo. Por todas las parteras del mundo, por todos los pueblos indígenas, por todas las naciones que nacen a través de los niños, por todas las mujeres solas, por los hombres solos, por todos los ceremoniantes, por todos los que tenemos sangre de la tierra, por todos los pueblos del desierto, de los valles, de las montañas, de las nieves, por todos los pueblos de las islas. Bienvenidos todos a este tragún con la voz de un gran ceremoniante, un quimelfe, un quimche mapuche. Buena vida para todos y que volvamos a nacer entre las manos de las parteras. Buena vida. Bendiciones.
Memangin pupengi pula men newen today man. Isuyin na melalaing. Buena vida a todos los hermanos, que tengan mucha fortaleza, que sigan firmemente en este caminar, para que así algún día tengamos nuestro reconocimiento desde Chile acá, de nuestra comuna Macul, de la región metropolitana. Un saludo y un abrazo fraterno. Peucayal.
Peucayal. Trae el tomate.
Donde José, esto yo lo había soñado tiempo atrás. Estábamos haciendo la oración aquí los dos solos.
I thank Ms. Kinalan for leading our ceremonial opening this morning. Before we proceed, I would like to note a few practicalities for our dialogue this morning. We have interpretation between English and Spanish available, kindly provided by Land is Life. To enable interpretation, please see the menu below and alert our technical team through the Q&A platform if you face any difficulties. I would also like to notify all of our participants that the virtual commemoration is being recorded and live streamed to Facebook. I would also like to encourage you to pose any questions that you may have for our distinguished speakers today through the Q&A function. Towards the end of the program, we will have an interactive discussion where your questions may be addressed. Distinguished delegates, distinguished colleagues, now let me offer a few welcoming remarks. Indigenous leaders, excellencies, colleagues, and friends, welcome to this year's commemoration of the International Day of the World's Indigenous Peoples. As the Secretary General reminds us in his message for the day, Indigenous peoples are guardians of cultural heritage, stewards of vital ecosystems, and indispensable contributors to our common future. Today, as we honor Indigenous midwives, we pay tribute to generations of women who have safeguarded life through their knowledge, skills, and care. As custodians of Indigenous knowledge systems, Indigenous midwives promote holistic approaches to health that strengthen cultural continuity, community well-being, and resilience. Inclusive social development depends on recognizing Indigenous knowledge systems and ensuring that Indigenous peoples are full partners in shaping policies that affect their lives. The outcome of the Second World Summit for Social Development reaffirmed the commitment of member states to build more inclusive, equitable, and resilient societies. Indigenous peoples' knowledge, leadership, and full participation are essential to achieving that vision. For the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs, advancing the rights and well-being of Indigenous peoples remains a core priority. Through the Division for Inclusive Social Development, which I lead, DESA supports the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues as its secretariat. And we also co-chair the Interagency Support Group on Indigenous Issues. This ensures strong cooperation across the UN system with member states and with Indigenous peoples to support implementation of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Peoples, on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Let today's commemoration reaffirm our shared commitment to advancing the rights of Indigenous peoples through dialogue, partnership, and concrete action, so that Indigenous peoples are not left behind. I thank you for joining us today. It is now my pleasure to invite Ms. Aluki Kotiak, Chair of the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues, to deliver her welcome remarks. Madam Chair, the floor is yours.
First, I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to Maria and Jose Corrian for the opening ceremony. Indigenous sisters and brothers, excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, Tavavusi, greetings. Welcome to this year's commemoration of the International Day of the World's Indigenous Peoples. This year's theme, honoring Indigenous midwives, safeguarding life and well-being, recognizes the extraordinary contributions of Indigenous midwives to their communities and to humanity. It reminds us that Indigenous people's health and well-being are rooted not only in medicine, but also in culture, spirituality, ancestral knowledge, languages, and relationships with lands, waters, and territories. As chair of the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues, I warmly welcome this year's theme. It contributes to the momentum, leading to the inaugural observance of the International Day of Indigenous Women and Girls in September 2026, recognizing the indispensable leadership of Indigenous women in sustaining cultures, strengthening communities, and advancing sustainable development. For countless generations, Indigenous midwives have safeguarded life. They accompany Indigenous women throughout pregnancy, childbirth, and the postpartum period while maintaining and transmitting traditional knowledge, medicines, languages, and ceremonies. Their work extends far beyond the delivery of babies. They strengthen families, reinforce cultural identity, and ensure that each new generation enters the world with dignity, belonging, and joy. The United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples provides a clear framework for protecting this living heritage. It affirms the right of Indigenous peoples to self-determination and to determine our own social, cultural, and economic development. Article 24 recognizes our right to traditional medicines and health practices, while Article 31 protects our traditional knowledge and cultural heritage. Indigenous midwifery is a powerful expression of these rights in practice. Yet, Indigenous midwives continue to face significant challenges. In many countries, their knowledge remains insufficiently recognized, and Indigenous women continue to experience discrimination in assessing culturally appropriate health care. Protecting Indigenous midwifery requires recognizing Indigenous knowledge systems, respecting free, prior, and informed consent, and building intercultural health systems where Indigenous and biomedical approaches work together with mutual respect. Experience from many countries demonstrate that culturally appropriate maternal health services developed in partnership with Indigenous peoples can improve maternal and newborn health while strengthening cultural identity and community trust. Respecting Indigenous knowledge and rights benefit not only Indigenous peoples, but society as a whole. The Permanent Forum has consistently emphasized that Indigenous peoples' health must be addressed through a human rights-based and culturally grounded approach. Health services should be accessible, acceptable, affordable, and of high quality while fully respecting Indigenous peoples' cultures, languages, and traditional knowledge. As we honor Indigenous midwives today, we also recognize the broader leadership of Indigenous women as knowledge holders, educators, healers, environmental stewards, and defenders of their people's rights. Indigenous women's contributions are essential to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals and to building inclusive societies as reaffirmed in the outcome document of the Second World Summit for Social Development. Today's commemoration is a call to action. Governments should recognize and support Indigenous midwives. Health systems should promote respectful collaboration with Indigenous practitioners. The United Nations must continue working in partnership with Indigenous peoples to advance the implementation of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. On this International Day of the World's Indigenous Peoples, let us honor Indigenous midwives, not only with our words, but through concrete action. Let us invest in culturally appropriate health systems that value Indigenous knowledge and ensure that future generations of Indigenous peoples can thrive with dignity, health, and the full enjoyment of their rights. Huyanamig. Thank you.
I thank you, Aluki, the chair of the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. Distinguished colleagues, we're just receiving word of an earthquake that's hit the region. We continue to keep your family's safety in our thoughts and prayers. We understand that it has impacted Peru, Colombia, Ecuador, Panama, and Venezuela. Your safety continues to be the top of our thoughts and prayers. Distinguished participants, today's program has been designed as a dialogue. We will begin by hearing directly from Indigenous midwives and knowledge holders before turning to a discussion of policy, partnerships, and action. It is therefore now my pleasure to hand the discussion to the moderator of the first dialogue session, United Nations Assistant Secretary General Bjorg Sangier. ASG, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Great. Thank you very much, Charles. I hope you can hear me.
We hear you well.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you again, Charles, and greetings. I am very pleased to be here today to begin with Indigenous midwives themselves. Because, as we've heard as well, too often Indigenous midwifery is viewed solely through the lens of health services. Yet, Indigenous midwives are also knowledge holders, educators, caregivers, and cultural leaders whose contributions help sustain communities and strengthen Indigenous identities across generations. So I am honored to be moderating this first session with a distinguished set of speakers that I'm very pleased to introduce in a minute. I would like to just also say that my role as moderator also means that I'll try to make sure that we have time to hear all the speakers in both the sessions, and I'd like to just ask our speakers to spend just a couple of minutes each in their responses to make sure that we have a good interactive discussions. So I would like to start with Ms. Marta Arotingo, a Quechua traditional midwife and herbalist from Ecuador, whose work focuses on preserving and transmitting Indigenous midwifery knowledge through culturally grounded community approaches. And let me start with you and ask, because Indigenous midwifery is often described as a knowledge system, how does Indigenous midwifery reflect broader Indigenous worldviews, values, and relationships to community? Marta Aratingo, over to you.
Alipunja tukuykunawan yupaychani kayman convidashkamanta ñuka shuti imashamaniparka Marta Arotingo kapani partera Quichua Kotakachi kay Ecuador mama llaqtamanta ashtawanpash kaypi ashaguta rimarishpa kankapak shamupashkani. Buenos días con todas las personas que nos están escuchando, que nos están viendo. Es importante y quisiera comenzar diciendo que para mí la partería indígena no es solamente es un servicio de salud, sino que es nosotros hablamos de partería indígena como una forma de entender la vida. Y voy a hablar desde mi experiencia como partera quichua Cotacachi, aquí en Ecuador, que nuestra partería no ha nacido dentro de un hospital, no ha nacido dentro de libros, sino que nuestra partería ha nacido desde esta relación que nosotros tenemos con la madre tierra, con nuestros mayores, ¿sí? Con nuestras familias, dentro de nuestras comunidades. Cuando una partera está acompañando un nacimiento de un niño, la llegada de un niño, la llegada de una niña, no estamos solamente atendiendo un proceso biológico. En realidad estamos acompañando la llegada de una nueva vida a una familia, a una comunidad, a toda una sociedad. Es así que para nosotros entender el embarazo, el nacimiento y el posparto están relacionadas con nuestro territorio, con nuestra alimentación, con nuestras plantas medicinales, con nuestra palabra, con los cuidados, con nuestros rituales y con con los vínculos que se generan entre generaciones. Por eso decimos que la partería indígena es un sistema de conocimientos vivos. De esta manera, pues, nuestra transmisión comienza, ¿no? Desde la abuela a la madre, de la madre a la hija, ¿sí? De las parteras mayoras que transmiten sus conocimientos a las nuevas generaciones. Así, todos sus conocimientos se transmiten a través de nuestras lenguas, ¿sí? De nuestros valores, de nuestra espiritualidad, de nuestra identidad propia y de nuestras maneras de relacionarnos con la vida. Pero para esto también quiero decir algo muy importante, ¿sí? Una partera no trabaja sola. La partería indígena vive en comunidad cuando una mujer necesita su cuidado. Alrededor de ella están su familia, otras mujeres, la comunidad y la partera. Por eso nuestro trabajo no termina cuando nace el bebé. Seguimos acompañando a la madre, al recién nacido y a la familia. También para cuidar la vida necesitamos cuidar nuestros territorios y nuestros conocimientos. Por eso es importante reconocer a las parteras indígenas. Decimos que no significa solamente reconocernos como proveedoras de servicio de salud, significa reconocer nuestros sistemas propios de conocimientos, nuestra autoridad, nuestra capacidad de cuidar y nuestro derecho a decidir cómo queremos transmitir y fortalecer nuestros saberes. Esto es fundamental para la autodeterminación de nuestros pueblos. Y hoy estamos aquí no solamente para hablar de la importancia de las parteras indígenas, sino para decir que nuestros conocimientos están vivos, que tienen un futuro y que las nuevas generaciones tienen derecho a aprenderlos, a practicarlos y a llevarlos adelante. Porque es importante proteger a una partera, porque cuando protegemos a una partera, estamos protegiendo mucho más allá de un oficio, ¿sí? Porque estamos protegiendo a una memoria, una cultura, un territorio y una forma de cuidar la vida. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much for those initial reflections on these very important questions. I would like to turn to our second panelist, Nicole Arton, an Indigenous certified nurse midwife of the Diné people and Navajo Nation, and founder of Changing Woman Initiative and the Ni Wikoni Midwifery Field Clinic at Standing Rock. She is a maternal health leader whose work bridges Indigenous knowledge systems and contemporary maternal health practice. So, Ms. Nicole Arton, from your experience as a nurse midwife and Indigenous health leader, what distinguishes Indigenous approaches to childbirth and maternal care? And what do you think others can learn from them?
Yeah, everybody. Nicole Arthur Nisha, Glash Inish Lindo, Tochini Bushes Chinish Guys, Desha Che, Nanastasia Deshanala. I gotta say that to bring my ancestors into this space. As a nurse midwife who's worked in the community, in hospitals, as well as other parts of the country, I would say the medical model of care teaches you or us how to navigate Western medical systems of care that focus primarily on pharmaceutical management, something that's taught to us in institutional setting like a university. And basically it teaches that birth and maternal health care is a medical event, and it has a mindset of managing a disease process, which is very different from an Indigenous worldview. So Indigenous approaches to this are that the perinatal period from the time women become aware they are pregnant, it's a sacred time to share knowledge about plant medicines and language, ways of caring for ourselves, and to strengthen the bonds with our community, because it's a ceremony the whole community holds. It's an opportunity to share teachings with the next generation. And it's Indigenous way of knowledge transfer that just isn't through a certified institution, it's through living and experiencing it through practice. So what I would say, what others could learn from this is traditional medicine is our way of life and caring for ourselves as Indigenous peoples. It's not an alternative way of care. It's one of the oldest, most rigorously cared systems of maternal care on this earth. It has survived deliberate efforts to end it, And what we can learn from Indigenous midwives is that there can be a third way to navigate the polarities of Western medicine and traditional medicine, in a place in which Indigenous midwives like myself, who stand in both worlds, holding ancestral knowledge and skills while braiding it with some Western medical skills. So I feel like the question really is like, it's not that whether Indigenous midwives can meet a standard that's set by Western standards like Western medicine. It's whether the systems that we are having to engage to take care of our families can actually change, and be aware and support what our midwives have always known for a long time to sustain our communities. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. I would now like to turn to Ms. Rhonda Lee Grantham, who is an Indigenous midwife and herbalist from the Cowlitz Nation and founder and director of the Center for Indigenous Midwifery, dedicated to strengthening Indigenous birth practices and Indigenous midwifery education. So, Ms. Rhonda Lee Grantham, what role does Indigenous midwifery play in strengthening Indigenous communities, supporting cultural continuity, and advancing self-determination? Over to you.
Good morning. This question, what role do we play in, what is more essential to health and wellness and thriving as an Indigenous peoples than the way we're born, than the very existence of being held in ceremony from, being called in, from into the person's body, to being held while they're growing, to being welcomed from their first breaths through all of their first moments. That new child who's joining the community, that new community member, as well as, the transformation that happens in the entire family and community. So there is no separation. There is no ability to separate our existence and wellness as a community member from all of these, foundational moments, from this ability to, thrive and be welcomed from the beginning. I do feel that, with the Center for Indigenous Midwifery, I'll just speak specifically around, our Cedar Medicine School of Midwifery, and that of our current enrollments, from 14 different states and 40 different tribal and other Indigenous nations, that everyone is striving and fighting hard to preserve and walk this path with their full Indigenous self and the unique needs of their communities, and oppressive and challenging forces that are all too common threads that are experienced by everyone. So it's the beginning of the weaving of the fabric. It's being able to, instead of just trying to hold people through traumas that they experience at their birth and hold them in ceremony, but to help prevent that from the beginning. And it is a core of being an Indigenous person, to be welcomed with your whole Indigenous self.
Wonderful, thank you. Finally, I would like to turn now to Laura Lemons, who is an Indigenous doula and certified professional midwife dedicated to supporting women and families throughout their birth journeys. With experience in community-based maternity care and midwifery practice serving Alaska families, Laura brings valuable insight into the importance of respectful, family-centered birth care. So I would like to ask you, Laura, what does culturally safe childbirth mean for Indigenous women and families, and why does it matter?
Good morning. As an out-of-hospital midwife who has spent the last 5 years catching babies in homes and birth centers, I know what birth looks like when it's trusted. Culturally safe care is not a clinical checkbox. It's an unwavering belief in the innate physiological ability of the body to bring forth life. It means understanding that while medical intervention holds profound value when it's truly needed, it should never be the default. True safety exists when birth is grounded in community, is physically secure, and it's deeply affirming of our ancestral culture and tradition. For thousands of years before colonization, our people successfully birthed on our own lands and waters. Yet our current centralized system often enforces the exact opposite. In Alaska, rural pregnant individuals are routinely uprooted from their homes at 36 weeks to give birth alone in sterile, unfamiliar regional hospitals. When they arrive, they enter a system where many providers have never witnessed an undisturbed physiological birth. In my career, I've watched the hospital system project fear into birthing bodies. I have seen forced interventions, and I have witnessed the devastating realities of obstetrical violence through ignorance, discrimination, and racism. This happens in part because our system lacks representation. Across 5 major cultural regions, 20 languages, and more than 200 tribes, there are only 3 Indigenous Alaskan midwives in the entire state. And currently, I'm the only one providing community-based care outside of the hospital. Right now, I'm serving a very small population of Indigenous birthing families, and I'm deeply grateful for the families I'm able to serve. But I know the reach of my current practice is limited. I want to serve more of the people in Alaska, especially those already entering the hospital system who deserve to see themselves represented within it. That's why I'm returning to school to pursue my Master's of Nurse Midwifery. I'm stepping into the hospital system as an Indigenous midwife to protect and hold space that honors, hold space for those who desire and deserve to birth in a way that honors their culture, their traditions, and their autonomy. I want to protect physiological birth and the physiological experience of birth within the hospital system. Institutional barriers are immense, and to earn this degree, I have to leave my state, my life, and my family for 3 years. I'm willing to make that sacrifice because I know this work is bigger than me. Across midwifery and traditional birth work, education must become easier to achieve. We must integrate more trained Indigenous midwives and birth workers into our care systems right now, because when we protect the birthing parent, we build a stronger foundation for the entire household. Culturally safe childbirth is about healing, protecting, strengthening future generations. And to do that, we must transform the system and bring birth back into our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. So we've heard 4 introductory reflections, very important reflections, where you have highlighted connections between midwifery, culture, language, land, identity, and community. Such important issues to bring up on a day like this. We have a few minutes left of this session, and so I would like to use those to explore some of those connections that you raised just a little bit further. And I wonder if I could turn to maybe Rhonda and Martha first and ask each of you to provide just very brief or very briefly to tell us a bit more about how Indigenous midwifery helps to connect new generations to culture, to community, and identity. I'll give you just a minute or 2 each if you can reflect on that for us. Maybe I'll go to Rhonda first. Over to you.
Okay. Connection. There is no separating the work of the Indigenous midwifery from our plant medicine work, from our traditional healing work, from our food sovereignty work, and also from our political work. The land-based connections that Marta spoke of prior, and also the ceremonies that we're called to hold. There was a statement in the Q&A about the role of supporting families, through loss and through stillbirth, and this narrow definition and of what an Indigenous midwife is asked to do and called to do and allowed to do and regulated to do, oppressed into not attempting to have us be able to provide. The connection is that people are bringing their entire Indigenous self and the ceremonies that are lifelong. There is no separation. There's no ability to separate who we are from, what we are trying to be able to have a family experience and to be offered. So that's what I would say is that it's a interwoven fabric that we're bringing and that we are fighting for on every front.
Interwoven fabric, very powerful connection indeed. Thank you for those reflections. Martha, would you like to also give us some reflections on, again, the connections that midwifery provides?
Bueno, yo quisiera primero decir que estoy muy esperanzada, ¿sí? Para mí, las nuevas generaciones me dan mucha esperanza, ¿sí? Cuando veo a jóvenes indígenas interesarse nuevamente por nuestros conocimientos, por visitar a las abuelas, ¿sí? Veo que nuestra memoria no va a desaparecer, ¿sí? Que vamos a continuar y que vamos a seguir en este camino. Es así que para nosotras, aquí en Cotacachi, especialmente el pueblo quichua Cotacachi, a través del Consejo Indígena de Salud Ancestral, está liderando un proceso bien interesante de transmisión de saberes a través de una escuela de partería ancestral que se llama Unancho Mamacuna, ¿no es cierto? Que viene liderada de la mano de las parteras, ¿sí? Desde una pedagogía, desde de nuestras abuelas, ¿sí? Entonces, yo creo que esto para mí es muy esperanzador porque una forma de no desaparecer de este sistema en realidad, o una forma de continuar, una forma de seguirnos entrelazando, como lo mencionaba anteriormente, de seguir vivos y que de nuestros sistemas se mantengan, es seguir transmitiendo nuestros conocimientos, ¿no es cierto? Eh, y sobre todo, que nuestras generaciones venideras puedan conocer nuestros sistemas de salud, nuestros sistemas de educación, nuestros sistemas de agricultura. Así que todo este sistema, estos conocimientos puedan continuar. Yo creo que esa es la forma o es la manera que nosotros tenemos, ¿no? De seguir vivos y nos hemos mantenido durante generaciones y generaciones. Entonces, desde ahí, yo creo que seguimos, nuestro futuro es este presente, ¿sí? Y nuestra memoria son nuestras ancestras. Y hoy quiero como un poco también agradecer a esta movida de la tierra porque nos ha dado un jalón de orejas diciéndonos que está presente y que ahora que estamos hablando justamente sobre temas de pueblos indígenas, la madre tierra se ha hecho presente. Entonces, eso quisiera como un poco dejar aquí, dentro de todas las reflexiones, sí, como que tenemos que mantener viva nuestra transmisión de conocimientos.
Thank you very much for those reflections. Let me now, for the last reflections in this session, turn to Nicole and Laura. And I would like to ask both of you just to reflect on what kind of support could make the greatest difference for Indigenous midwives and their communities. So looking forward there before we close this part of the session. And I'd like to turn to Nicole first. Over to you.
Thank you. Right now, the political landscape around Indigenous midwifery is really challenging. There's a lot of overregulation of midwifery, not just in the United States, but globally. And international organizations like the International Confederacy of Midwives that recently withdrew their statement of support for Indigenous midwifery, those type of institutions really influence policy and regulation on all the countries that they influence. And the fact that we're not in those spaces advocating on behalf of our community, but further lack the financial resources to be in those political spaces, to even be at the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues, to have our issues represented. I was recently at the Commission on Status of Women, and that Indigenous women still are not centered in that space, and that's a women's space, right? There's also a lot of institutions and countries that have not ratified CEDAW, which like 35 talks about Indigenous people's rights and Indigenous women and protecting our health. And so when I say like what are the opportunities and what would support Indigenous midwives would be institutional protections and policies and regulations that support and actually braid together our knowledge and education and community knowledge that we've learned in our from our ancestors, right? Also creating protections so that what happens when policy doesn't support us is that on the other side is criminalization and potential going to jail is on the other side of that. And so spaces like this where we're able to represent our communities, to talk about what Indigenous midwifery means to us, having the support of the UN behind us, having the support of the regulatory bodies within our states and our countries really supports our ability to bring our community together through the innovative ways that we have moving forward through Changing Women Initiative, which is a maternal health organization I started in New Mexico, trying to braid together traditional knowledge and making a space for Indigenous midwives was really challenging because the medical model of care really regulates who can work in the institution, who can get paid by insurance. They've defined safety for Indigenous midwives, and we are not in any of those spaces defining that for ourselves. And so moving forward, like partnerships, statements, not just coming to an event like this and learning about our issue, but like partnering with us and making sure that we're in the boardroom, that we're in the institutions that are creating regulation in our states and our member states in the UN, right? Right now, we have still little representation in the UN space, and we have a couple of treaty bodies that we can work through, but we need more participation and partnership. And there are beginning to be more organizations globally that are starting to work together to support Indigenous midwives and to braid together the polarities. And so for me, like creating pathways that integrate both knowledge systems and honors them is really the pathway forward and creates opportunity for us to build a workforce, which is a challenge for many of us because there's very few Indigenous midwives. Like Laura's having to go back to school to be a nurse midwife, right? I became a nurse midwife and have to navigate both institutions and the policy landscape. It shouldn't be that challenging to serve our communities. So that's what I would say.
Thank you very much also for outlining clear challenges as well as, I would say, a path or recommendations going forward. So I would like to now turn to Laura for the final reflections in this part of today's discussion, and ask you as well if you would like to reflect on challenges or really what kind of support would make the greatest difference for Indigenous midwives and your communities. So for those final reflections, over to you, Laura.
Thank you. I echo Nicole, but also the things that have affected me personally, but also I know our barriers is just where we live. We live in very small communities. We don't have access to transportation. We don't have access to education. Most things are not online. I had to actually go out of state for a lot of my training when I became a certified professional midwife. There's also financial barriers that plays a huge part in traditional midwifery and accessing traditional midwifery and midwifery in general. I would love to see the Indian Health Service support birth options on our homes and in our homelands, but also recognizing direct entry midwives and midwifery credentials, because if we can integrate some of that in some of the other types of midwifery into our systems, then we can bring those people who are in their villages and in their hometowns into the hospital system. And there's just a gap that is right now we're unable to bridge it. And actually many of our regional hospitals are shutting down and are not birthing. And so as those hospitals shut down, people are being flown into Anchorage or into the bigger cities to birth their babies, and they don't get to bring a support person. So just being able to bring midwifery back to our homes, back to our homelands, and integrating that into the hospital system, I think that makes sense, and that is a barrier right now.
Great, thank you. Very clear message again. I'm looking at the time, and I think we have time for a short closing reflection from each one of you. So I would like to challenge you to think about if there was one message that you would like participants to remember from today's discussion, what would it be? And I would like to, I think maybe let's go in the same order that we did for the opening statements, and start with Marta Arotingo. One message that you would like people to remember. Over to you.
Muchísimas gracias por este espacio. En realidad, me gustaría que recuerden que cuando una partera indígena está acompañando un nacimiento, no solamente está ayudando a nacer a un niño o a una niña, está ayudando a que continúe un pueblo, una comunidad, un sistema en general. Por eso proteger a las parteras indígenas es proteger nuestros conocimientos, nuestra cultura, nuestra identidad, nuestra tierra, nuestro territorio, nuestra vida. Recordarles que nuestros conocimientos están vivos, ¿sí? Y nuestra responsabilidad como parteras y como pueblos indígenas es asegurarnos de que también puedan vivir en las próximas generaciones. Entonces, para nosotros mantenernos en este tiempo es bastante difícil, bastante duro. Hemos escuchado todas las intervenciones. Sin embargo, pues desde nuestra resiliencia seguimos, continuamos y caminamos juntas. Eso es súper importante, caminar de la mano todas. Gracias.
Thank you so much for that message. Nicole, Arthur, final message?
Yeah, I would say oftentimes people hear all of us speaking and definitely feel inspired and called into action to do something. And I want to acknowledge and recognize that supporting Indigenous midwives isn't just showing up for today's session, right? Writing your letter to your congressperson, participating in any decisions around policy related to Indigenous midwives, even choosing the path of a midwife, right? You can start there. We all have a place in protecting and supporting Indigenous midwifery. And that being united is really, really important. The more of us that come together to fight for Indigenous midwifery in our communities, the harder it is to push us aside and step over us. And so I really encourage you to get involved with community type actions around Indigenous midwifery. If you're choosing to become a midwife, make that step, move forward with it. And that there is a community of us who are fighting to protect Indigenous midwifery in our homelands and in the UN United Nations space, and that we are here. We've been here a long time. We're not going anywhere. And that, it's not just that we deserve a place in our communities, that we've always had it, where we have rights that we are now exercising as Indigenous people, and that Indigenous midwifery as a rights holder means that we have political pathways to advocate on behalf of our community, and to make you aware that that is a pathway. We're not a special interest group. This isn't like, exciting woo-woo stuff. No, we have knowledge that is politically protected by the UN Permanent Form of Indigenous Issues and other treaty bodies, and that there is a pathway forward.
Thank you. We take that pathway forward with us. Rhonda, Lee Grantham, what would you like people to remember? The one thing you would like people to take away from the discussion today? Over to you.
I think that what I would really encourage and support, both for the midwives who are doing this work, for those who are trying to support us, is that there is to not be lost in all of the terms and which tools or what place or how we exercise this craft, but an Indigenous midwife is a rooted midwife. An Indigenous midwife should be welcomed and supported and encouraged to bring their whole Indigenous self, and in whatever tools will help to support their community, that we grow into those. The current model of parachuting in outsiders into our communities to provide our healthcare, to welcome our babies in a shallow, empty, over-medicalized way is not working. It is not protecting us. It is not supporting us. It is not improving our health outcomes. That system is not working. And we demand to have our rooted midwives, our community members, our people who are invested, impacted by any of the imbalances within our community, to be the ones who are part of this sacred ceremony. So that's what I would really like to encourage is, the parachuting is not helpful. There are aspects of it that may have been a temporary band-aid, but rooted midwifery that is held in community is a key to improving the health in all of the ways for all of our community members.
Thank you. I noted rooted midwifery, no parachutes. But thank you very much for that clear message. Finally, Laura, what would be your one message, one takeaway from this discussion?
I'm just really honored to sit on a panel with these other Indigenous midwives. The thing that I guess I would like to bring forward and leave is trying to look towards the future that removes some of the barriers that I've had to experience, and to bring back the education from our ancestors and from the people that have gone before us that have done this work. And I'm really encouraged that it's happening, and that there's some light that's shining on the fact that we deserve to be supported by Indigenous women who know where we're from and who have been there and who honor us and our cultures. We need to bring birth back to our homes and to our homelands and to our waters and to our communities. And that is the bottom line. And I just want to leave you with a quote from a tribal doctor. Her name is Dr. Rita Pitka Blumenstein. And she reminds us, when we heal ourselves, we heal our ancestors and our grandmothers and our grandfathers and our children.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that message. It's very clear, I think, from this discussion today, how Indigenous midwifery is so much more than a health intervention. As you've heard very clearly, how this is a living knowledge system that contributes to identity, to continuity, to well-being, to self-determination, and that needs to be rooted in community. And that knowledge that all of you bring. So thank you. Thank you for what you do. And thank you also for being with us today. That concludes the first dialogue session. The second one will focus on how governments, institutions, Indigenous peoples organizations, and the United Nations can help ensure Indigenous midwives are recognized, supported, and empowered. And for the second dialogue, it's my pleasure to hand the moderation over to Astrid Hurley, who is Senior Program Management Officer with the DESA Division for Inclusive Social Development. So Astrid, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Georg. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. It was a pleasure to listen to the first dialogue and the messages that you left with us. The need for rooted midwifery, and the call for support, recognition, and protection. And that gives us an excellent segue into what we're going to speak about in this second dialogue. which brings together Indigenous leaders, policy practitioners, and UN representatives to explore the practical pathways for advancing recognition and for supporting Indigenous midwifery. So with that, allow me to introduce briefly the speakers for our second dialogue. With us, we have Miss Abra Nungasuk Patkotak, who is Inupiaq from Alaska. She is an Indigenous full-spectrum birth worker and student midwife and co-creator and co-director of the Alaska Native Birth Workers community. Also with us is Miss Agnes Lena, who comes from the Kajiado County in Kenya, which is inhabited mainly by the Maasai. Agnes is the founder and executive director of Illaramatak Community Concerns and the gender coordinator of the Indigenous Peoples of Africa Coordinating Committee. Also with us is Ms. Dora Lucia Mendez Alfonso. She is a Celtal Indigenous woman from Las Rosas, Chiapas, Mexico, and she is a traditional midwife with 17 years of experience. She joins us today in her role as the coordinator of the Continental Alliance of Traditional and Indigenous Midwifery of the Americas, and she's also co-founder of the Chiapas Midwives Movement. Finally, allow me to introduce our colleague, Ms. Maria Victoria Bertolina de Prati, who joins us today from Tahoe. She's a specialist in obstetrics and gynecology, and she has extensive experience. She's a consultant with the Pan American Health Organization and in the Cultural Diversity Unit of the Department of Social Environmental Determinants for Health Equity. There, she works on projects related to the health of Indigenous peoples and Afro-descendants in the Americas. So thank you very much for joining us, Abra, Agnes, Dora, and Victoria. So I would like to start by inviting each of you to share some opening reflections similar to what we did in the previous dialogue. And I'm going to begin with Agnes, if that's okay. So Agnes, good evening. From the perspective in
Yes,
Indigenous...
my name is Agnes Leina.
Yes.
Can everybody hear me? Because
We
sometimes
can hear you well.
You can hear me?
We can hear you well.
Okay, thank you. Yes,
So
my name
Agnes,
is Agnes Leina from Kenya, and I run an organization called Illaramatak. Community concerns means caregivers or caretakers of nature, of human beings and animals, because we are pastoralists. And I'm so glad to be here and to have my contribution towards midwifery, recognition of Indigenous women's midwifery. And
thank you,
I will,
Agnes.
when you give me the chance, I will be able to talk about some examples that I have experienced here in Kenya.
Thank you so much. Well, this will give you the opportunity as I pose the first question to you. So from the perspective
Astrid,
of...
can I switch off my video, because that will improve the quality of my so that I can also hear you properly.
Sure, no problem. You can do that.
Thank you.
Then I'll pose the question.
All right, thank you.
So Agnes, the question we have for you today is, from the perspective of Indigenous women in Africa, what are the most pressing challenges and priorities for strengthening Indigenous systems of care and supporting Indigenous women and girls?
There are quite a number of challenges. First of all, Indigenous women's midwives are not formally recognized. Here in Kenya, we call them TBS, traditional birth attendants. And that's all, and that's the farthest it can go. But there's no documentation, no formal recognition, just that name. And much as we think that we are happy with that because we have drummed about it for a long time, that we need to be recognized and all that, that's all it has done. But we need a policy. So there are no policies to recognize the Indigenous birth attendants, what we are calling now here, TBS, traditional birth attendants. And if I can give you even an example, my own sister-in-law was going to hospital to have a baby. And immediately they told her that she has to go through a CS section, a cesarean section. And she decided to go back home. And I witnessed the birth attendants attending to her, and she had a very healthy little baby boy. And so definitely it tells you that there are things that cannot be done in the hospitals. It's only the traditional birth attendants, which is now indigenous midwives, who can only do it. So that's a very big challenge, lack of formal recognition, both at the national and regional levels of indigenous ways of care. The indigenous midwifery is not respected. I can say so because if someone, in fact, what they do these days, they make sure they go from home to home to tell women who are pregnant, as you prepare to have your baby, please make sure that you pack your bag and go to hospital. You know, they don't respect traditional birth attendants. It is not preferred at all. In fact, it is being called, they say it is backward, it is outdated, and all this is just because of the Western healthcare systems that are more preferred, that are more formal, that are more recognized. So then they go around and tell the women, you know what, you cannot have a baby here. Sometimes even the right to have your immunization may be denied simply because you did not go to the hospital to have your baby there. They prefer that you have that you have to go to hospital, and they don't recognize the traditional birth attendants. In fact, we have here in Kenya one hospital in our county here in Kajiado that recognizes that the traditional birth attendants can actually birth a baby. And so what they've done, they've put one little hut, Maasai hut, inside the compound. And then the women come, because the women will come and sing for the baby. They'll sing for the woman. The woman will also be massaged just towards the time of her having the baby. And the older women, the TBS, will sit there with her. And then they put the traditional fire and they bring firewood, because that's their way. That's their way of handling it. And then they talk to the lady, encouraging her so that she is not scared. And then they also have their own traditional foods that they feed to the mother who is about to have the baby. So this is being used at the moment, and we are trying to see how it can be formalized. So in that hut, they call the nurse just to come and see the dilation, until the time comes for the hut to have the baby. And they allow the midwives to do it. But as you can see, it has to be within the vicinity of the hospital. And for sure, it does not have to be. They can do it at home. And they have a right to have immunization. Those nurses can do what we call mobile clinics, come and then immunize the child. And there are many other challenges, the women have to trek, and they have to go far, and there are no roads, and there are no vehicles to go and give birth in the hospital. Yet, if only they can formalize and recognize traditional birth attendants, they will do it very comfortably at home. And they do not have to die on the roads, because it is so common for women to die on the road on their way to hospital. And so now we are drumming to them and saying, you know what, you have to recognize our way of doing, our way of care, and then let the women have the children at home. So I don't know whether I go to the next one, which was the priority, or should I leave
Agnes,
there?
let's
Yes.
just stop here right now so that everyone has enough
Okay.
time to share their perspective as well. So
Okay,
thank you very much for sharing that perspective. So
you're
I would
welcome.
like to turn now to Abra. Abra, can you tell us I mean, Agnes touched on some of it just now, but from your perspective and in your experience, why is recognition of Indigenous midwifery important for Indigenous women, families, and communities? Particularly in your sociocultural region, you can give us some examples from there if you would like, but your perspective on that.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Astrid. Good morning. So wonderful to be here with you all this morning. Speaking from Alaska, particularly, so I'm Inupiaq from the north of Alaska, and my people are on the Arctic Ocean. And the community that I'm from is Utqiagvik, and it's the most northern community in the United States, and I believe the ninth most northern community in the world. And there, we've lived for thousands of years and giving birth on our homeland, supported by Inupiaq midwives. And this was taken from us through colonization of our bodies and our health care. And in the removal of midwifery from our community, it really impacted the way that pregnant and parenting people have options for where they want to deliver. So instead of being supported to give birth at home, as others have shared, now most families, the majority of families, have to travel hundreds of miles, and usually at 36 weeks pregnant, sometimes before if they have other healthcare issues. So sometimes many months before, and then they're staying in Anchorage or another large city alone without support. And that's really why we created Alaska Native Birth Workers community, so we could be there for these families so they are no longer alone. And it's so important that people understand what midwifery is, how to access midwifery, because currently it's people's rights are being taken from them by not being supported in their own communities to give birth where they want, how they want, and supported by their community members. And for me in my community, the last Inupiaq midwife to support a birth at home on in the Arctic was in the 1990s. So it's been a long time. And another very important thing we need to look at, particularly in Alaska and in the United States, is access to midwifery education. And this is similar to what was shared on the previous panel, what Laura shared and others, that there is currently no route for schooling in Alaska. And the majority of our people, our Alaska Native people, are giving birth in the hospital because that's what's accessible to them. So we really do need a change in access to midwifery care, and we need a change in access to midwifery education and a greater understanding and acceptance that having access to a midwife from your community, Indigenous midwives from your community, is a human right that everyone deserves. We deserve to be welcomed by someone who knows us and knows our family and knows our culture and can care for us in that way throughout their whole lifetime. And that is something that we had for time immemorial. And we're reclaiming that now in Alaska and gaining access to that right to care by our people, from our people, because that's what will truly make our people strong for generations to come. Unless we're welcomed by people who understand us, then there's harm and trauma within the birth space. So that's for now my opening statement. Thank you so much for welcoming us here and for uplifting midwifery on the International Indigenous Peoples Day. It's really wonderful to be here.
Thank you so much, Abra. And I hear some commonalities across what you're saying and what Agnes is saying in terms of the right to give birth in the way that you want, where you want, connected to your community, the impact of of the removal of the midwives and having to travel these long distances unsupported in some cases, and the impact on the birth space, being brought into this world in a space that is not a part of who you are, is not connected to your soul, impacts can have an impact not on the individual and on the community. I hear both of you saying that. With that, I would now like to take us back to the Americas, and I would like to ask Ms. Dora Mendez if you could share with us across the Americas, what are Indigenous midwives asking governments, health systems, and international institutions to do to better recognize and support your work? Dora?
Sí, gracias Astrid. Bueno, con el permiso de nuestras ancestras, pueblos y territorios, pues saludo a todas y a todos quienes hoy nos acompañan. Este Día Internacional de los Pueblos Indígenas, dedicado por primera vez a honrar a las parteras indígenas, pues nos convoca a transformar el reconocimiento en acción. Nuestra labor como parteras tradicionales indígenas pues enfrenta grandes y graves desafíos. Las parteras somos discriminadas, somos criminalizadas, se nos niega el reconocimiento jurídico y se nos excluye de los sistemas oficiales de salud. Las políticas públicas fragmentan la salud de la cultura, la lengua, la tierra y la gobernanza, debilitando los sistemas propios de los pueblos. Además, los intentos de subordinación, institucionalización y profesionalización de la partería tradicional indígena buscan imponer sistemas biomédicos ajenos a nuestras realidades, ¿no? Como alianza afirmamos que la interculturalidad en la salud no es basada en la autodeterminación de los pueblos, es otra forma de colonialidad. Todo esto pues refleja un sistema que no reconoce plenamente la autonomía y la libre determinación de los pueblos indígenas en materia de salud. Pues como les comento, pues la criminalización y discriminación que enfrentamos en nuestros territorios, en todas las Américas, como las compañeras ya lo han mencionado, pues es algo que daña nuestra integridad física y nuestra práctica ancestral. Es algo que viene ya haciendo un borramiento de nuestros pueblos y territorios indígenas con esta colonialización en las prácticas de salud. No se nos reconoce como un sistema propio de los pueblos, la medicina tradicional, la partería ancestral. Esto hace también que la subordinación y la profesionalización institucional esté muy atentada a nuestras prácticas y estén queriendo pues hacer este borramiento, como les decía. Y justamente posible eh, falta, ¿no? de todos esos, pues estos obstáculos que tenemos, pues hacen que la transmisión generacional de nuestros saberes, pues sea mucho más complicado, mucho más difícil, que nuestras jóvenes, pues ya no quieran reconocer estos saberes, porque realmente lo que ven es discriminación, es violencia hacia nosotras, hacia las mujeres, ¿no? Como en un momento decía las compañeras, el decidir dónde, cómo y con quién parir de las mujeres, que es un derecho que tenemos como mujeres, pues no se nos está respetando. La otra situación también que tenemos, pues, son las políticas fragmentadas que separan la salud de la cultura, la tierra y gobernanza, ¿no? Nosotras como pueblos indígenas, pues sabemos que nuestras gobernanzas, nuestras prácticas culturales, ancestrales, pues son primordiales para la vida en la tierra, ¿no? Entonces, estas políticas públicas que han sido medias hechas, ¿no? Porque realmente habla sobre la protección de la partería tradicional indígena, pero realmente en territorio no se está dando tal como lo dice. Entonces, también esto afecta mucho la partería ancestral porque es una situación que se sale de nuestras manos, digamos, porque sí dicen estamos de acuerdo, apoyamos la partería, pero en la realidad, en la práctica, pues realmente vemos una situación diferente. Esa sería mi intervención por ahorita.
Thank you so much, Dora. Discrimination not only impacting the practice of midwifery, but the interest of the younger generation to even learn and carry on the practice is something that I know that you mentioned that I think is a great challenge for making sure that these knowledge systems move forward. And the point you made that, you know, implementation must match commitment. There are commitments that are being made. There are expressions and advocacy for support, but we need to see it implemented in the countries where these commitments are made and in the territories where these commitments are made. With that, I would like to take the opportunity to pass to our colleague from the Pan American Health Organization, Victoria. We've heard the comments made by our Indigenous speakers. So from your perspective, working with the Pan American Health Organization and with the UN system in general, what lessons can be drawn from the efforts that have been made to strengthen culturally appropriate and intercultural health systems? And what relevance do these lessons have for Indigenous midwifery?
Muchas gracias, Astrid. Muchas gracias a todos por la invitación. La verdad que un honor estar aquí hoy en este día. Quisiera compartir en principio tres, tal vez, lecciones aprendidas como para ordenar. Es muy interesante todo lo que han dicho hasta ahora, es lo que vemos también en los territorios. Entonces, en primer lugar, la participación social es clave, es esencial. La salud intercultural no se puede construir para los pueblos, sino es de los pueblos y se construye junto con los pueblos y, como bien dijeron todos, es de los pueblos. Está en los diferentes documentos normativos, en especial la declaración, como también comentaron varios a lo largo de esta intervención, en la Declaración de Naciones Unidas sobre los derechos de los pueblos indígenas. Entonces, la experiencia que pudiera compartir de la OPS con la metodología de los diálogos interculturales es de gran valor. La metodología de los diálogos interculturales con la que venimos apoyando y trabajando permite encontrarse a grupos de diferentes culturas o de diferentes sistemas médicos, tradicional y biomédico, para el aprendizaje mutuo y la planificación conjunta eventualmente que se requiera, ¿verdad? Estos diálogos son horizontales, basados en la simetría, en el respeto mutuo, sin preponderancia de un saber sobre otro. En segundo lugar, quisiera destacar que las políticas interculturales, y también como dijeron quienes me antecedieron, deben ir más allá de las palabras, lo que en inglés es walking the talk, ¿no? En este contexto, la política sobre etnicidad y salud, o la OPS viene trabajando con pueblos indígenas desde los años 90, pero en particular el año 2017 y después de un largo periodo de elaboración participativa, también junto con pueblos indígenas y ministerios de salud, entre otros, se aprobó la política sobre etnicidad y salud en forma unánime por todos los Estados miembros. Y esta política proporciona un marco fundamental a través de 5 líneas estratégicas. Una, traducir todos los commitments o todos los compromisos en acciones. La segunda, promover la participación social y las alianzas estratégicas. Pajo tiene también bastantes alianzas con el FILAC, redes de jóvenes indígenas de Latinoamérica y el Caribe, también con Land is Life estamos comenzando, con la Alianza Continental de Parteras hemos trabajado. Bueno, reconocer o promover el reconocimiento de los conocimientos ancestrales y las medicinas tradicionales, desarrollar capacidades a todos los niveles, generar evidencia sobre desigualdades étnicas, por supuesto, respetando la soberanía de los datos. En tercer lugar, existen herramientas y a veces son muy necesarias para ayudar a traducir estos principios en acciones. En este contexto, la herramienta de promoción del parto culturalmente seguro de la OPS, desarrollada justamente conjuntamente con parteras indígenas de diferentes países y territorios, evalúa 5 dimensiones claves de la atención de la salud materno-infantil cuando esto ocurre dentro de los servicios de salud, y es para asegurar que se respeten y se garanticen derechos. Por ejemplo, respeto a la autonomía, entonces se busca garantizar el acompañamiento, la devolución de la placenta, el permitir uso de medicinas tradicionales para manejo de dolor, por ejemplo, bueno, comidas, etcétera. El otro es cómo está la comunicación y trato en los servicios. También para garantizar el consentimiento libre, previo e informado, la no discriminación, cómo está la infraestructura, si hay espacios de participación social comunitaria y el fortalecimiento y desarrollo de capacidades institucionales. Entonces, como para cerrar un poquito esta parte, diría que existe un reconocimiento, porque también tenemos que reconocer algunos avances, ¿no? Existe un reconocimiento cada vez mayor de la necesidad de los diálogos, de la necesidad de la participación social, del aprendizaje mutuo, de la co-construcción. Esto y de herramientas que, bueno, que garanticen estos derechos, como estaba escuchando también a las anteriores ponentes, ¿no? Entonces, es importante porque estas lecciones son relevantes porque la interculturalidad exige reconocer el derecho de los pueblos indígenas al disfrute del grado más alto de salud, como lo dice la Constitución de la OMS, al derecho a sus medicinas tradicionales, también como lo reconocen varios instrumentos normativos, y entre ellos, como mencionaba, la Declaración de Derechos de Pueblos Indígenas, y el acceso, cuando requieran, a los servicios de salud sin discriminación. Entonces, gracias, Astrid, esta primera parte cerraría acá, si les parece.
Thank you very much, Victoria. So thank you for pointing out the methods that have been used, at least in the Central South American and Caribbean region, in terms of the UN's outreach and work with Indigenous peoples through intercultural dialogue. You mentioned the need for generating evidence and the role that you're trying to play with that, and the importance of community participation in making these things go forward. This leads me to a question that I want to ask to Agnes, Abra, and Dora, in terms of the role of Indigenous midwives themselves in ensuring that we move this dialogue forward with governments, etc. What role do you see Indigenous women and Indigenous midwives as having? What role should they have in shaping future policies and programs that affect them? Agnes, I'd like to start with you.
Yeah, I think the role of the Indigenous women midwives is an advocacy to make sure that their role is being recognized, first of all, and even respected. As I said earlier, we have a small dispensary here in Kajiado that has decided to put a hut inside the compound. But my question is, why should it be there? Why can't the ladies just stay at their own home and have their children at home, but at the same time have the right for immunization by the hospital? Because the contradiction here is they think traditional birth attendants are not clean, they are not hygienic, but I can tell you the children who are born there are so healthy, and they have always done it in their past, and there were no reported deaths or complications. But now the complication comes because of the policies that everybody should go to hospital. And then they come and visit them at their homes and say, when the D-Day comes, please come to hospital. And the people, the traditional birth attendants are happy to do their work right there at home and not in the hospitals. I sit in the board of the hospital here in Kajiado, the referral hospital. And I go to see the women who have been forced to come and give birth in the hospital. And I can tell you, pathetic. They're in a pathetic situation. They do not understand the language, first of all. They cannot talk to anybody. They are on their own, they're lonely, they're feeling lonely. And when people who come to visit them
come to see maybe whether the baby has been born or something, they are stopped at the gate. So they have no one to talk to. Then when you get into the wards, they are congested. They are not used to congestion. So it's just a very pathetic situation. And in the comfort of their homes, they can have those children. And so the women have played their role, the midwives, what we call TBS, traditional birth attendants, have played their role very, very well. And they just need recognition. And we just need to document the work that they are doing and legalize and not criminalize the work that the TBS are doing. Uphold and not marginalize traditional midwives or what we call TBS, traditional birth attendants. We need to formalize midwifery and support it. If they can come from their hospitals and say, you need this and that support, the women, the role of the midwives here is to mention and say, what do we need? And then what kind of support do we need to be given? And they're given the support right at the comfort of their own homes. In our tradition, as soon as the baby is born, the women will sing. The sex of the baby will be mentioned if it's a girl or a boy. And then after that, there is a ceremony for naming that child. All those things, you don't get them in those wards. So it is so disheartening that people are not given the freedom to do their own way, to have children in their own respectfully and in their own spaces and in their own traditional knowledge which they were born. And this knowledge also needs to be passed on from generation to generation. And we can't do that if we are going to hospitals. How? They go to hospitals. In fact, most of them get super scared because they see all these gadgets and they're wondering now what's happening here. And at home, the difference is they get a massage from the TBA, and then they will sing for her to forget even the pain. And then the support, the full support, the traditional support is there, but not in the hospitals. Such support is not there. And that's what they need. And so we need policies that will not criminalize traditional birth attendants. We need policies that recognize and respect traditional way of birthing. And we need laws that protect these the traditional birth attendants. And all those we do not have. And of course, the right to immunization at home. And WHO needs to adopt traditional birth attendants. I think traditional birth attendants need to teach everybody what it is like to be a traditional birth attendant, so that you do not have to force people something that they do not know and something that they do not want. So the WHO should recognize Indigenous women's midwifery, and we need to drum about it during the CSW and even at the UN Permanent Forum. Yeah, I think that's all I can say for now.
Thank you so much, Agnes. So Agnes has highlighted advocacy as one of the most important roles for Indigenous women in shaping future policies and programs that affect them, for Indigenous midwives. Abra, your perspective on that question, what role have Indigenous midwives been playing, or what role can they play to help move this effort forward?
Absolutely. Thank you, Astrid. The role of Indigenous midwifery is so important. It's central to cultures and the cornerstone of health. The way we are brought into this world is the way that that family will grow and be well. And when it comes to policy, the voice of midwives is really essential. And I share that I'm a student midwife, so I'm not yet practicing as a midwife. And I really appreciate having that voice here too, because as I stated earlier, education, access to education is so important. And what I heard other people reflect, letting young people know that this is important, that you can become a midwife, that this is a valid and honored pathway for individuals to take is essential. And in policy and in advocacy, if the voice of the midwife is not there, then choices are being made that take away the importance of midwifery. And I even see it in day-to-day interactions. Many people don't know what a midwife is. And historically, we were all brought into the world by midwives. In Alaska, when I ask people, their grandmothers, their great grandmothers, they all had access to midwives from their communities. So if our voices are not centered at a policy level, then we will continue to lose access to midwifery care, and it'll be taken from us further. So centering the voice of midwives in policy, making sure that midwives are at the table and that the birth givers and life givers, those voices are also so essential. The birth givers in our community are asking for this. They're requesting access to midwifery, and it needs to be at a community level, at a hospital level, and then when you look out in the United States, at a state level, at a national level, at an international level. So here in the United States, many Indigenous people who are under a federally recognized American Indian or Alaska Native tribe receive care within the Indian Health Service. So it's also really important for the Indian Health Service to recognize all types of midwifery, for them to recognize direct entry midwives and certified professional midwives, and not just certified nurse midwives, which is how it is currently. It's so important for all types of midwifery to be acknowledged and accessible to people, and also paid, so that we can give care in our communities and give care where people are seeking care. It's similar to what Laura shared earlier, the fact that IHS doesn't recognize certified professional midwives is now she's having to make a whole change just so she can provide access to her community members. And so we need to listen to those who are the life givers, the birth givers. They are requesting access to midwives. And if we are not there at the policy level advocating for what people are requesting, then midwifery will continue to be inaccessible. So it's really, really, I think we're at a pivotal moment right now in this conversation. And it's amazing that we are being honored on this day, that midwives are being uplifted, because it's truly what community members are asking for.
Thank you so much, Abra. I hear you talking to your role, the role of Indigenous women and midwives in educating, in knowledge sharing, in being the voice in the policy making space to make sure that the rights are understood, that the needs are understood, that we can move the conversation forward in a truly informed way. So I would like to seek Dora's perspective on that, and I'd like to add a little bit to the question, if you don't mind, Dora, being the role that you play also in the Continental Alliance in also balancing your response, not just with the role of Indigenous women, but how the public institutions and the governments can help support you in without undermining your traditional systems of knowledge transmission, etc. So how these two roles, how your role, your interventions, your advocacy, your education can be better complemented, supplemented, supported from the other side so that we can move forward. Dora?
Gracias, Astrid. Sí, bueno, para empezar me gustaría recalcar lo que ya las compañeras han estado diciendo, que la partería no es solo un acto de salud, sino es un acto territorial, espiritual y político también, ¿no? Pues nosotras como parteras acompañamos la vida y el bienestar de nuestras comunidades. Pues nuestra práctica asegura la continuidad de nuestros pueblos, sosteniendo una identidad cultural y fortaleciendo los sistemas propios de cuidado. Pues la partería también es reconocida como una expresión viva del derecho a la libre determinación, donde no nos limitamos a una atención médica, ¿no? Estamos también en constante atención y relación con los territorios, las lenguas, la espiritualidad y los conocimientos ancestrales. Esto cabe de señalar que pues las parteras tradicionales indígenas no solo somos las que ayudamos a parir a las mujeres, sino también somos las guardianas de los conocimientos, de los saberes de nuestros territorios, pero también somos las cuidadoras de nuestros territorios. Eh, También somos responsables de nuestra transmisión intergeneracional, donde también protegemos las prácticas, idiomas, tradiciones culturales, ¿no? Pues ante todo esto, a las amenazas a la apropiación, a la folclorización o subordinación institucional. Nosotros como parteras, un poco de lo que tú comentabas ampliando la pregunta, pues yo considero que todas las parteras indígenas debemos ser reconocidas como actores políticos legítimos en la gobernanza mundial de la salud. Nuestra participación debería ser vinculante en decisiones nacionales e internacionales, en esencial para garantizar políticas respetuosas de nuestros sistemas autónomos. Pues nuevamente la partería pues es inseparable de la tierra, de la cultura, la lengua, la espiritualidad. Y pues nuestra práctica fortalece el bienestar integral de las comunidades y la relación con la madre tierra. En este sentido, pues lo que nosotras necesitamos y hemos estado pidiendo desde la alianza y desde nuestros territorios, pues es que se reconozca a la partería tradicional indígena como un sistema propio, autónomo de los pueblos, de los territorios, porque solamente con ese reconocimiento legítimo que se pueda dar a través de alguna política pública donde reconozca nuestro sistema propio de salud de las comunidades indígenas, pues se puede dar también todo el respeto, la valorización que estamos pidiendo, porque como te decía hace rato, pues la profesionalización ha abarcado nuestros territorios, ha llegado a tecnificar a la partería, a desplazarlos de nuestros conocimientos ancestrales, y pues es algo que nosotros estamos en resistencia y que estamos luchando porque nuestros conocimientos pues sean, haya una trascendencia de ellos, ¿no? Que podamos transmitir nuestros conocimientos de forma libre, sin presión, sin criminalización, sin condicionamientos, para que pues la partería pueda florecer plenamente. Y pues aquí, por ejemplo, hablando de México, yo creo que en todos los países se dio, pues se vio muy claramente en esta situación en el momento que estábamos viviendo con el COVID, ¿no? Los sistemas de salud, pues, colapsaron totalmente, no habían centros de salud, no habían casas de salud, no habían hospitales que recibieran a las mujeres o a otras atenciones que nosotros estuvimos dando. Y pues realmente desde entonces se vio realmente la importancia, lo fundamental que es la partería ancestral en nuestras comunidades, ¿no? Pero más sin embargo, carecemos todavía de ese reconocimiento y de esas políticas públicas que realmente valoren y reconozcan la partería como un sistema propio de salud de nuestros pueblos indígenas.
Thank you so much, Dora. So Dora has reiterated the importance of recognition from governments, from institutions, and also reminded us of the broad role, the broad and deep role that Indigenous midwifery plays in Indigenous peoples' communities. We're a bit pressed for time, Victoria, but I still want to give you an opportunity to respond in this round in terms of telling us, you know, we've highlighted the challenges, we've highlighted the priorities, the role that Indigenous women do and should play. In your practice from an institutional point of view, when it has worked well, when attempts to successfully strengthen Indigenous midwifery has worked, where it has worked, what lessons can we draw from that that can help us further this?
Disculpa, tuve un corte, creo que fue para mí la pregunta, ¿cierto?
Repítame, por favor, lo siento.
Sorry, Astrid.
Yes. Yes. So what lessons can be learned where from those communities where attempts to successfully strengthen indigenous midwifery have had some success?
Gracias, gracias, Astrid. Bien. Sorry, tengo que cortar acá. Sí, bueno, hay realmente buenas experiencias y experiencias muy positivas en diferentes territorios. Estamos, creo que, empezando a caminar en algunos de estos. Como yo les comentaba, tanto la política sobre etnicidad y salud que se basa, entre otras, en muchos documentos normativos, entre ellos la Declaración de Derechos de los Pueblos Indígenas y el convenio 169 de OIT, bueno, etcétera, en temas de salud universal, como bien también decía Madam Chair al inicio, sobre accesibilidad, calidad de atención, etcétera. Bueno, se está comenzando a trabajar. También es verdad que fue la pandemia en el medio de todos estos compromisos, pero la gran lección que vemos es el gran valor que tiene conocer, comprender, respetar sinceramente los compromisos ya asumidos, lo que está en el artículo 24 de la Declaración de Derechos de los Pueblos Indígenas, es clarísimo el respeto por sus tradiciones, sus sistemas de salud, sus practitioners. Entonces, lo que hay que hacer es pasar a la acción. Y ese paso a la acción, como a veces son diferentes los actores que están conviviendo en un espacio, es necesario el diálogo sin jerarquías, el diálogo simétrico, el diálogo respetuoso, que justamente permita el conocimiento mutuo, y como también comentaban, creo que fue, no recuerdo si Marta o Dora, sobre la cogobernanza y la coplanificación y la planificación conjunta. Y por supuesto el respeto por los sistemas de salud y de los mismos pueblos indígenas, ¿cierto? Entonces, nosotros con la metodología de los diálogos de saberes, incluyendo también la herramienta de promoción del parto culturalmente seguro, hemos tratado de apoyar en estas herramientas o metodologías de alguna manera de facilitación del aprendizaje, porque el conocimiento realmente trae la posibilidad de construir. Si cada uno está parado en su hacer es un poco más difícil, ¿no? Pero como bien decían, los pueblos tienen sus sistemas, sus voces y se deben respetar. Y el acceso al sistema institucional de salud también debe respetar las cosmovisiones, tradiciones, medicinas tradicionales, etc. También quería traer a colación, si tengo 5 segundos, es que desde Pajo también estamos apoyando la difusión de ese conocimiento a través de una serie de plataformas digitales en donde en este momento se está replicando información que esté publicada, pero están llamadas a compartir la información también que deseen. Una es la vitrina de los diálogos de saberes y otra es una sección de partería tradicional dentro de la Biblioteca Global de Medicina Tradicional de la OMS. Así que no sé si he contestado la pregunta, pero bueno, quedo dispuesta a mayor clarificación, si fuera necesario. Gracias.
Thank you very much, Victoria. So we hear you speaking to the importance of respectful dialogue, co-governance, joint planning, and you highlighted again what all our previous speakers have highlighted, the value of recognition as they want to be recognized, that this is important if we are going to support and protect Indigenous midwifery as a knowledge system. With that, as we are, our time is getting narrow, I would like to give all our speakers today an opportunity to give a very, very brief, quick 30 to 45-second reflection on this question. What if you could name one thing, what the most important thing that needs to be done today to ensure that future generations of Indigenous midwives can learn, practice, and lead? What is that step that needs to be taken today? I'd like to start first with, well, we'll go backwards. I'll ask Victoria if you can give that 1 point, and then we'll go to our Indigenous women and midwives.
Bueno, gracias. El 1 point sería crear las condiciones necesarias para que justamente este conocimiento se mantenga. Y esto tiene que ver con el mantenimiento de las lenguas, el respeto por la cultura. Y bueno, vuelvo a tomar el tema de los diálogos desde la horizontalidad. Veo que en el chat están poniendo que, bueno, que a veces no se da esa horizontalidad. Por eso ofrecemos también desde PAJO la posibilidad de facilitadores que mantengan esta horizontalidad. A veces el diálogo libre es verdad que no se da y a veces hay espacios de diálogos que no siguen la metodología de diálogos que proponemos. Esta metodología de diálogos a través de facilitadores que mantengan la horizontalidad y el respeto por los saberes sin preponderancia de uno sobre el otro.
Thank you so much, Victoria. Dora, what is the 1 point that you think, the one thing we need to do today to ensure that future generations of Indigenous midwives can learn, practice, and lead?
Sí. Bueno, pues yo creo que por parte de la Alianza nuestro llamado es claro, ¿no? Pasar del reconocimiento únicamente hablado a la acción, que los gobiernos realmente legislen y protejan nuestros derechos, que Naciones Unidas garanticen la participación plena y pues que todas las parteras que hemos estado resistiendo en este sistema occidentalizado, pues tengamos esa posibilidad de tener pues un desarrollo y un desempeño de nuestro trabajo pleno sin ninguna criminalización y sin ninguna discriminación, que no intenten profesionalizar la partería ancestral, que se respeten nuestros sistemas propios de salud de los pueblos indígenas y también que respeten nuestros derechos como mujeres indígenas.
Thank you so much, Dora. So, Abra, your perspective, one thing we need to do today.
Thank you. We just need to uplift and honor and center Indigenous midwifery as a cornerstone of our health and well-being and a human right for our people.
Thank you so much. So, Indigenous midwifery as a human right for Indigenous peoples. Agnes, your perspective.
Yeah, I think there is need to document best practices to be passed on from one generation to another for purposes of continuity, of posterity, because we need that intergenerational knowledge. And we need our young people to know our traditions and our culture. So that needs to be documented, and we need to formalize Indigenous women's midwifery and support it. It needs to be supported, and prioritizing policies that protect Indigenous women's midwifery. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Agnes. So Agnes has spoken to the need for documentation to support knowledge transfer. Rhonda, your one key takeaway.
The amount of time and amount of gifts that Indigenous midwives have not been able to pass on in their craft, that the time that that has occurred must end. There has been so much loss when oppressive, restrictive, regulatory, literal threats of harm and persecution to not only the Indigenous midwife, but to the families when they are exercising their sovereign rights of where and who they birth. With the time of inability to pass on the craft and to be supported must end. There has been, I've spent a lot of years recording the stories of people and of different traditions. And in my own 30 years of birth work, I see this pendulum swing of the march of medical colonization and what is lost and how it is not understood that when we lose those traditions, our people suffer from that loss, and that we need every effort possible to support, preserve, to advance, and continue, to be able to march forward and being able to support our families in being born with their whole Indigenous selves, with community members who are invested in them throughout their lifetime.
Thank you so much, Rhonda. Laura, your one takeaway.
I think the entities in Alaska who are protecting Alaska Natives and their birthing rights, such as the IHS system and the Alaska Federation of Natives, need to recognize the importance of birth and birthing practices for ourselves and our future generations. In Alaska, we need to revive Indigenous midwifery traditions which have been lost.
So recognition and revitalization. Nicole, your one takeaway.
My takeaway is that Indigenous midwives need to be in all leadership positions and not just in community as knowledge carriers, but also policy, finance, right? And our governing systems that create policy and enforce policy, and that we aren't just, knowledge carriers in our community, but we're leaders in our communities and all the spaces that we're in. And, that's, I think, really important to acknowledge. And the knowledge that we carry sustains our communities, but we bring that to all the spaces that we're in.
Thank you so much, Nicole. The importance of Indigenous women's and Indigenous midwives' voices being in the spaces that affect their well-being and their capacity to practice. And Marta, last but certainly not least, your one takeaway.
Muchas gracias. En realidad, creo que como último mensaje para nosotros, y ya lo han dicho todas, hay que reconocer, ¿no?, que el futuro de las parteras y en realidad que nuestra práctica siga preservándose es que de verdad puedan vernos como un sistema, ¿sí?, como parte de un sistema comunitario de salud ancestral. Si nos siguen viendo como parteras que tienen el oficio, como que solamente tenemos una práctica o una técnica, o sea, en realidad el reconocimiento sigue siendo efímero. Además, tenemos que garantizar que nuestras parteras mayores puedan transmitir sus conocimientos a nuestras jóvenes y que tengan las condiciones para aprender, también para asumir liderazgos y tomar decisiones. En realidad, creo que Nuestros sistemas tienen que seguir vivos, nuestros conocimientos tienen que seguir abriendo los espacios. Para esto, justamente ahora que hay la oportunidad que está aquí la compañera de la OMS, es importante que los diálogos de saberes dejen de ser solamente desde arriba hacia abajo, sino que en realidad podamos tener estos diálogos entre pares, entre iguales. Entonces, yo creo que todo esto va a continuar cuando nosotras también nos pongamos en los diálogos en igualdad de condiciones, cuando nos pongan en igualdad de condiciones. No podemos seguir siendo subordinadas, no podemos seguir siendo criminalizadas, no podemos seguir siendo perseguidas, ¿sí? Y no podemos seguir pensando que nuestros conocimientos son empíricos y que no tienen una ciencia. Nuestras ciencias ancestrales han sido reconocidos desde muchos años atrás y tenemos que seguir viéndola como es, como una ciencia que tiene en realidad mucha garantía y como parteras indígenas, hemos traído al mundo muchos niños desde hace miles y miles y miles y millones de años. Nuestros conocimientos siguen vivos, nuestra práctica sigue viva, nuestros sistemas comunitarios siguen vivos y creo que eso es lo más importante. Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much. Well, we have gone past the time that has been allotted for this meeting, but I want to thank all the speakers so much for bringing the rich perspective, bringing their experience into this space, raising our awareness, showing us the challenges, the priorities, the things that have worked and what we can do better. Throughout the course of the conversation, there were some questions being posed, most of which you have already answered in the course of this conversation, and the understanding that Indigenous midwives need to be respected as for who they are, the knowledge they transmit, the role that they play. You've acknowledged that they need to be recognized. You know, there was a question about allowing that they need to be recognized as knowledge holders, as caretakers, as leaders, and be able to practice. You talked about the importance of mutual exchange, co-governance, co-creation in policy spaces. And most importantly, you spoke about the importance of moving from commitment to action, concrete action, upholding the rights of Indigenous peoples, Indigenous women, Indigenous midwives, recognizing that access to this type of care and the ability to transmit this knowledge is a right of the peoples. With that, I want to thank all of our speakers. I want to thank everyone who joined us here in the webinar. And I want to thank everyone who also followed online on Facebook through our live stream. Thank you for joining us today on this International Day of the World's Indigenous Peoples to honor Indigenous midwives. And with that, this webinar is now adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.